I'm Anthony Servino with the Face Off Sports Network with my top fantasy football waiver wire pickups for NFL Week 9. We're going to start with Blake Corum. Now, I know what you're going to say. Blake Corum is stuck behind Kyron Williams, one of the more productive running backs in the NFL. The dude scores touchdowns on a weekly basis. He doesn't really concede a lot of touches. So why are we adding Blake Corum? Now, Blake Corum, he's finally passed Ronnie Rivers on the depth chart. Why is that important? Because Blake Corum isn't getting a lot of reps, right? He's only getting around 5 to 7 snaps a game, which is what he's had in weeks 7 and 8. Not really getting touches. He has a total of 7 rushing attempts in the past 2 weeks and 1 reception. The reason why we're picking up Blake Corum is because you want to handcuff Kyron Williams. This Rams offense, it's ascending. It's getting healthier. Puka Nakua, Cooper Kupp are back. This Rams offense could be a juggernaut in the second half of the season. And if Kyron Williams succumbs to injury at any point, Blake Corum, not Ronnie Rivers, is going to step in to one of the best running back roles in fantasy football in this Sean McVay offense. Blake Corum, if he's available on your waiver wire and you have a deep enough bench, he is a must-add priority pickup. And this isn't a great week for running backs. But if Blake Corum is there, be proactive. Think ahead. Because if Kyron Williams goes down, Blake Corum could be a fantasy football league winner down the stretch. Let's go to another running back, Sean Tucker. This is a three-headed monster backfield, but we know who the primary rushers are. It is Bucky Irving, it is Rachaad White, and Sean Tucker gets the leftovers. And Sean Tucker, we know a few weeks ago against New Orleans, he absolutely went ballistic. 14 for 136 and 1 as a runner, 3 for 51 and 1 as a receiver. Since then, he's quieted down. The backfield's getting healthier, which means Sean Tucker is back into that number 3 role, and there's not a lot there. In fact, the past 2 games, 15 and 7 snaps, 5 and 2 carries. Just like I said about Blake Corum, this is a valuable backfield. We've already seen Rachaad White succumb to injury. What if Bucky Irving succumbs to injury? This two-headed monster backfield makes Sean Tucker all that more valuable in your fantasy football roster because you have one of 2 running backs that could potentially go down. And if you have Sean Tucker, you know he's going to play. This is not a one-headed monster, if you will, like we just talked about with Kyron Williams and the Rams. You have both Rachaad White and Bucky Irving handling enough touches to be fantasy relevant. And if one of those guys goes down, Sean Tucker, who we know can play in this offense, who we know can run efficiently and also catch the football effectively, he's going to have immense fantasy value. Chris Godwin is gone. We know Mike Evans is a little bit banged up. He could be extremely busy if the role opens up. So this is another proactive move at the running back position in a week where, let's face it, the running back position is not great for the waiver wire. So both Tucker and Blake Corum are more of proactive just in case moves. Now let's go into a position that could potentially help you in the immediate future at wide receiver. We're going to start with Michael Wilson. It shocked the hell out of me this week, but Michael Wilson, Marvin Harrison Jr., it was a tough Miami secondary, giving up the 3rd fewest PPR points per game to the wide receiver position. Well, we know Marvin Harrison Jr. had a big day, and so did Michael Wilson. Hauls in 5 of 6 targets for 31 yards, and the score good for 14.1 PPR points. Michael Wilson has now gone for double-digit PPR points in 3 out of his past 4 games. He's being used, right? He is the number 2 option. I get people like Dortch and Zay Jones return, but Michael Wilson has carved out a nice little role. Doesn't get a ton of volume. He is getting 17.2% of the team targets. He's only being targeted on 20.1% of the routes he is running, but a nice, reasonable 69.2% catch rate, 50.8 air yards per game. He's a good number 2 wide receiver. And when the enemy defense, they're trying to take out Marvin Harrison Jr., there is going to be times where Michael Wilson is going to be targeted. Last week, Michael Wilson was targeted 2 times in the red zone. If you go back to week 6, 2 times in the red zone. He is emerging into a quality red zone weapon for Kyler Murray. And yet Kyler has been great as a thrower of the football this year, but it looks like things are looking up for Kyler and this Cardinals offense overall, and this Cardinals team overall, they're fighting for first place, surprisingly, in the NFC West. So they're going to be looking to throw the football, to stay in games, and to win games because this defense is extremely suspect. Let's go to our next wide receiver, Ricky Pearsall of the 49ers. We know Brandon Ayuk, he's done for the year. Debo, he's outstanding. In fact, Debo, without Brandon Ayuk, he's a monster on a football field. This 49ers team coming off of the week 9 bye, they're getting CMC back. They're getting healthier. They're going to get Jennings back. So why are we picking Ricky Pearsall up? Because we've already seen Jennings miss a little bit of time due to injury. We know Debo, he's all sorts of banged up in and out of the lineup. We could be looking at Ricky Pearsall Jr. as the number 3 receiver on this team, but there are going to be weeks where he's going to be the starter in 2 wide sets because of injury. The rest of season schedule, there's going to be some spots where Ricky Pearsall Jr., you might be able to use him. Tampa Bay, one of the worst secondaries in the NFL. Week 10 coming off the bye. Seattle, you got matchups against the Rams, potential shootout. And in the fantasy football championship against Detroit in week 17, they're the 3rd easiest matchup for enemy wideouts. By that point, who knows if the injury bug keeps stinging the 49ers and Pearsall's in even a larger role, because at that time, he's going to be, 8, 9 games deep into his NFL career. Right now, he looks good. He looks okay. He's only 2 games in. Now, going into the bye week, he's going to have time to practice with the ones and really get acclimated with Brock Purdy and this offense. So this is a proactive move. I get you can't pick him up this week. They have the bye. He's going to be more expensive next week if you pick him up off waivers. Now is the time. Get him while he's cheap. You're not going to have to spend a lot of fab to get him. Ricky Pearsall Jr. should be added in all formats, but especially in PPR. Cedric Tillman. This is my favorite waiver wire pickup for week 9. He's an immense priority over anybody else. We have seen a 2-game sample size of Cedric Tillman in an elevated role. He is number 2 in the wide receiver room and snaps to Jerry Jeudy. In these 2 games, 12 and 9 targets, 8 and 7 receptions, 81 and 99 yards, 2 touchdowns, 16 and 28 PPR points. The schedule's erratic, right? Like, I get people look at the schedule, you see the Chargers, the number 1 defense against enemy wide receivers and really good against the pass overall. The Browns are a unique situation, right? They move off of Cooper, who's one of the better aging wide receivers in the NFL. Tillman's a former 3rd-round pick. Judy's a former 1st-round pick. Elijah Moore, former, I believe he was a early 2nd or late 1st-round pick. There's draft pedigree in this wide receiver room. There's draft pedigree, 1st-round draft pedigree with David Njoku. They got Chubb back in the lineup. And this offense, especially when it comes to throwing the football, is much more effective and efficient with Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston, he has nothing to lose. He knows the NFL does not really view him as a starter. He's going to be a career backup and a bridge quarterback, right? Think Andy Dalton moving forward. Think Joe Flacco. Jameis Winston doesn't really care about the matchup, right? He's not worried about, oh, it's a tough defense. I got to be really careful. Jameis Winston's going to throw the football all over the place, which means I think Cedric Tillman is a usable piece despite the matchup this week. And then coming out of the bye, you got teams like New Orleans. Denver looks tough, but again, Jameis Winston doesn't care. He's going to find the open receiver and try to fit into those holes. He has nothing to lose. A nice rest of season schedule for Cedric Tillman. He looks like he's going to be the volume option. And here's something I said in a live show last night. Jameis Winston, number 2 quarterback. Cedric Tillman, he was 4th on a depth chart all season long until they moved off of Amari Cooper. Well, guess who was practicing together most of the time this season? It was Tillman. It was Winston. There's a rapport here, and I expect Jameis Winston to continue peppering Cedric Tillman with targets. Tillman right now is being targeted on 22.4% of the routes with a 69.2% catch rate when the football is going in his direction. Let's stay with these Browns receivers. Elijah Moore, he's another guy we should be adding. Now, he's 3rd in the pecking order when it comes to snap share. But when it comes to targets, he's being used. This is now back-to-back games with at least 6 targets with a season-high 12 last week against Baltimore, double-digit PPR points in back-to-back games with a season-high 16.5 last week against Baltimore on 8 for 85. Elijah Moore, if you remember, popped in his rookie year with the Jets. For whatever reason, he hasn't quite gotten it together since. This is an ideal spot for Elijah Moore to get some of that confidence back, because we can already see that Jameis Winston trusts him and he continues to target him. I get Jerry Jeudy still there. Jerry Jeudy has not looked the same. In fact, Jerry Jeudy played his best football this year with Amari Cooper and Deshaun Watson. That's no longer the case since we have seen Jameis Winston take over in the past 2 games. Yeah, Jerry Jeudy's getting 6 and 8 targets, not really doing much with them. Now, last week against Baltimore, we saw all 3 of these wide receivers with double-digit PPR points. That was a Baltimore secondary. They're the 2nd easiest matchup in the NFL. That's not going to happen every week. If we look at the 3 games for Jerry Jeudy from weeks 5 to 7, not great. 1 reception in each game for under 35 yards in each game without a touchdown. Maybe last week was an anomaly. Maybe the enemy defense is moving forward. They tried to eliminate Jerry Jeudy and let these other options like a more experienced Tillman and Elijah Moore beat them, which is why I would rather use both Elijah Moore and Cedric Tillman especially over Jerry Jeudy until I see a shift in the pecking order when it comes to trust and reliability. Let's stay in Cleveland, and we're going to go to Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston, fantasy-wise, like I get the opinion around the NFL. He's not an NFL starter, not a great starter, but he's a great fantasy quarterback. We've seen Jameis Winston put up some monster numbers in the past, most notably with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. That was a long time ago, but we have seen already in 1 game as a full-time starter last week. I get the matchup was there. Jameis Winston with 28.9 quarterback points, depending on the platform you are playing in. Completed 65.9% of his passes, 3 touchdowns, 334 yards, 8.1 yards per attempt. 5 plays, pass plays over 20 yards. And he threw the ball 41 times. Chubb, I believe he saw right around 14 or 15 rushing attempts, which is fine. They're going to still get him acclimated off this injury. And maybe we see a little bit more Chubb this week against the Chargers, but let's be real here. As good as the Chargers defense is against the pass, they're just as good as the run. So it's not like, hey, like, this Chargers defense are not really good against the run. We're going to hammer Nick Chubb. No, I think we see a similar approach where Nick Chubb, maybe they increase his reps to or his carries from 15 to 17 or 18. But I see a world where Jameis Winston is still dropping back. I don't know about 41 times. This is probably going to be a slower pace, lower scoring game, but Jameis Winston, I do see a world where he's dropping back 30 times. And with those weapons to disperse the football to, Jameis Winston's going to be a usable fantasy asset, not only this week, which is a little bit risky, but I can see a world why you would start him. But there's some nice matchups down the stretch. The quarterback position has not been reliable. And if you need a spot start at quarterback, Jameis Winston moving forward is your guy. Let's go to John Metchie. And John Metchie, why is he stepping into a prominent role potentially? We don't know what's going on with Stephon Diggs, right? Stephon Diggs goes down with a non-contract injury. They have a short week, Thursday Night Football against the Texans. He's been listed as an estimated DNP on Monday. We don't really know the status of Stephon Diggs. Is it a short-term injury? Is it a season-ending injury? I do, and I will say with confidence, I doubt Stephon Diggs plays on Thursday Night Football. I just don't see a world where that happens because of the non-contact knee injury and because we really don't know the severity of it. And I think if it was good news, they would tell us already. John Metchie now steps into a really nice role. Nico Collins, he is out. They're saying he's going to come back in week 10. Texans, if there's a week to use John Metchie with Stephon Diggs unlikely to play and no Nico Collins, it's now. Metchie came in last week, 20 offensive snaps, 3 or 4 targets, 29 yards, solid, not good, not great. What's important here, he did see 2 red zone targets out of his 4 and on those 20 offensive snaps. There's not a lot else here. With Diggs potentially down, we're going to see Tank Dell in that wide receiver 1 role, Xavier Hutchinson, and John Metchie, right? The Jets, it's a tough matchup, but this secondary isn't exactly playing well. The Jets defense isn't exactly playing their lights out football. And if you're in a bind, right? Injuries, bye weeks, underperforming players. If you're in a bind, then John Metchie could be used. Let's go to another wide receiver. This time I actually like a lot, and that's Parker Washington. Rostered 0% on Sleeper. Christian Kirk, he is now done for the year. Brian Thomas Jr. dealing with a multi-week injury. I believe Gabe Davis even left last week with an injury. It's dire for the Jaguars and their wide receiver room right now. I get Evan Ingram's going to be busy. They have Brenton Strange. Maybe they run increased, multi-tight end sets. But assuming Brian Thomas is out, and he is going to be, and we know Christian Kirk is out, Devin Duvernay is on IR, we're going to be looking at a wide receiver room. If they're lucky, they get Gabe Davis back from the shoulder injury. It's going to be Parker Washington and Tim Jones. At least Parker Washington potentially has a little bit of a pulse in this offense. He's poised for a larger role. Last week, 41 offensive snaps, 3 or 4 targets for 46 yards, including 1 red zone target. You get Philly this week, and Philly's defense, they're Jekyll and Hyde, but their secondary is the Achilles heel. We're going to assume that Philly is going to be able to get their offense cooking in this matchup against Jacksonville. So I'm going to think about a potential game script situation. Jacksonville's going to have to throw the ball early and often. They're going to have to try to play catch up. And I see a massively increased target share for Parker Washington. If you need Parker Washington, you need a wide receiver to start this week. I don't know if there's a better free wideout on the waiver wire than Parker Washington. Let's start to close out. Tyler Conklin, only 20% rostered, but we are seeing his usage trend in the right direction. He's gone for over 10.7 PPR points in 3 out of his past 4 games. We have seen target shares since week 3 of 6, 8, 9, 3, and then the past 2 games with 4. Although the target share has died down since Devontae Adams has come to the New York Jets, Tyler Conklin is getting used in the red area. He has back-to-back games with a touchdown. He has 3 straight games with a red zone target inside the 5. So there are play designs where Tyler Conklin is the guy in the red zone. And if you watch this game on Sunday against New England, the way Aaron Rodgers trusted Tyler Conklin to come down with that football, that was a questionable throw that could have went in the wrong direction. I love Tyler Conklin. I get a lot of mouths to feed in this offense, but the way they use him in the red zone, he has a high probability to score when the Jets are in the red. And you get Houston this week. They're lights out against the tight end. Maybe they're going to try to defend Brees or Braylon Allen. They're going to try to take out these wide receivers. Tyler Conklin could have a great opportunity to score, and the rest of season schedule for Tyler Conklin is really favorable. Let's close out the tight end position with Mike Gesicki. Mike Gesicki, without T. Higgins on the field, he's a number 2 wide receiver. We saw this earlier this year in week 2 against KC. We know T. Higgins was out. Gesicki targeted 9 times, 7 for 91. In week 1, T. Higgins did not play. But Gesicki was only targeted 4 times, 3 for 18, but he also had a touchdown call back. And now with T. Higgins out again against Philly, we see 8 targets, which is his most since week 2. Caught 7 for 73, his most since week 2, 14.3 PPR points, his most since week 2. If T. Higgins misses time, right? He's dealing with quads. He's considered day-to-day. If T. Higgins does not play this week against the Raiders, then you absolutely positively pick up Mike Gesicki and start him. The final player we're talking about today is Matthew Stafford. We talked about the Rams at the top of the show with Blake Corum. This is an ascending offense. He got his 2 top wide receivers back, and for the first time, he threw for more than 1 touchdown in a game. In fact, all season long, Matthew Stafford has thrown for a combined 3 touchdowns from weeks 1 to 7. Now that he got his guys back in week 8, tough Minnesota defense, Matthew Stafford throws for 4. He throws for 279 yards, his second highest total of the year, 8.2 yards per attempt, his second highest yards per attempt total of the year. We know the Rams are capable of making a late season run when their offense gets healthier. It starts cooking. It happened last year, and it looks like it's going to happen again this year. Some tough matchups ahead, some easy matchups ahead. But when you have Puka, Kupp, Stafford, Kyron at your disposal, and your offensive mind is Sean McVay, this team can emerge into a fantasy goldmine despite the matchup. The Rams are potentially matchup proof if their core of studs stay healthy, which means if you need a quarterback, Matthew Stafford should be amongst the top of your list.